Welcome to your Monday math lesson. I hope you guys had a great weekend, enjoyed all the snow, even though it's May. Nonetheless, I hope you guys had a good weekend. Hopefully got to relax a little bit and do something kind of nice for yourself. As I always say, that's something that really needs to be prioritized somewhat right now, is making sure that you're doing some self-care. And I hope you guys just had a good weekend. So for this first part of the lesson, we're going to do our review. And then we're going to do translations part 2. So we did translations where you have the triangle already plotted for you. All you had to do is just move it over so many spaces and up or down so many spaces. This time we are going to do similar thing, except this time we are doing it with just the numbers alone. So instead of actually having to move around on the grid, you're going to learn how to mathematically do it. But first and foremost, let's do our review. So if I gave you the triangle with these coordinates, A, B, C, and the coordinates were, let's say, -5, -2, and we had -5 and -5, let's say, and then we had -3 and, -3 comma -7. So let's say that was our triangle. And your translation, let's say I gave you a translation of 5, 3. What that means is you have to look at your coordinates. So your first one is your x, your second one is your y. So for x, if it's a positive number, you're going to the right. If it's a negative number, you go to the left. For y, positive number, I'm trying to make that look more like a y. Positive number means you go up, negative means you go down. So all you really needed to do was look at whether it was a positive or negative number, and then you would move that coordinate over that many spaces. So in this case, if I had -5 and I was moving 5 spaces to the right, I would end up at 0. If I had -2 and I was moving 3 spaces up, it would end up at 1. So my new coordinate for A prime would be 0, 1. So we learned how to do that by basically just counting out the squares. And I talked a little bit about how to do it mathematically. Today we're going to go further into that, because what if I gave you a translation that was something like -17 and +21? That would be a bit of a pain to have to manually count out. And that's the thing too, is you'd have to have a really big grid to move over that many spaces, and it's kind of a waste of time after a while. That's why we're going to learn how to just do it mathematically. Now, if you guys remember how to add integers, you're going to know how to do this. It's really quite simple once you get down to the details. So if I gave you, let's do a triangle. Actually, no, let's do a square this time, or a rectangle. We're going to give you 4 points. So I'm going to give you A, B, C, and D. And our translation, I'm just going to put it in the top left corner there in a different color. The translation will be -15, +12. So this will be our translation right here in red. And I'm just going to do this in a different color. So let's say our A coordinates are -12 and +5. This one will be -8 and +5. This will be -12, +2, and this will be -8, +2. So this would create a bit of a rectangle on our coordinate plane. So if I had a coordinate plane drawn out like this, it would be approximately around here, in this area of the grid. However, this time around, this is where we don't have to worry about plotting the shape or manually counting out the squares. We're just going to do it mathematically. The way to do it mathematically is basically you have your x coordinate, you add your x translation. So if I have negative 12, I'm adding my x translation. In this case, my x translation is negative 15. So I add negative 15. And that would give me my new x coordinate. So my new x, negative 12 plus negative 15 is negative 27. So that would be my new x coordinate, is negative 27. For y, it's the same process. I take my original y coordinate, which is 5, and I add my y translation, which is positive 12. So I add 12. My new coordinate, my new y, would equal positive 17. And I just apply that same rule and that same procedure to all my coordinates to get my new shape. So let's try this one. We have negative 8, and we add negative 15 because we add our translation. This would give us negative 8 plus negative 15. Remember, if we're adding two negatives together, you go to the left on the number line. This would be, and remember, our coordinate plane is basically just two number lines, one going side to side and one going up and down. That's kind of the nice thing about it, is you basically are just, you know which direction you're kind of moving. So negative 8 plus negative 15 is negative 23. That's my new x coordinate. My new y is I take positive 5 and I add positive 12 to it, which equals positive 17. So I'm just going to write out these coordinates nicely. So our a prime, or let's do this in a different color, a prime is negative 27 and positive, oh, I have to stop doing that. Negative 27 comma positive 17. Our b prime, remember we always use prime for our new shape. So a, b, c, whatever those are originals. Now we are doing the new translations, which is which is our prime. So then we take negative 17. This one was negative 23 and positive 17. And we would do the same procedure for both C and D. So you're adding those integers together. Sometimes though, you'll see translations that say, translate this many units. After you do that translation, it says, now translate it this many. So let's say it was translation of, we did our negative 15, 12 translation. Let's say it tells us to translate again, positive 7 and negative 2. The procedure for that one is the same thing. You add that to your prime coordinates. So your new prime coordinates, whatever those are, a prime, negative 27, 17, you apply this translation to your prime. But that's only if it has a second translation. Your original translation, you take your original coordinates, add the translation. So you add your coordinates for the translation. You have to do x and y separately. And then whatever this new translation is, so let's say b prime, you would add the translation after that. So in this case, you would add this translation. Once you get used to the procedure, it's really simple. You guys are also really good at adding integers together. It's the same process. It's just this time around, it's in relation to a grid instead of just adding integers together. So this is essentially what you're going to be having today. Is I'm going to give you a bunch of coordinates, A, B, C, D, whatever it is, and you're just applying a translation to them. And I think there's going to be one question where it says apply a second translation after original. So how you do that is you find the translation for all these coordinates. You take your prime numbers, so A prime, B prime, and C prime, let's say. Then you, whatever those coordinates are, you add your newer translation to it. So I take my A prime and I add 7, -2. And I do that for all of them, the same process I did originally. And that's essentially it. So this time around, we're just doing it completely numerically instead of on a grid and counting out squares. There weren't going to be too many questions just because I know there's a lot of processes involved for each shape because you have to add it so many times over. So don't worry, you won't have too many of them. But that's essentially it. And then Wednesday, we are going to start doing reflections. So that's it. You're just going to have a bunch of numeric questions. It's going to be available on a PDF or Google form. And otherwise, if you email me if you have any questions, and I'll see you on Wednesday.